Jax's revenge domain. They announced Bryce's promotion during the Tuesday morning all-hands meeting at 9:42 a.m. Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately, with a compensation package that included $240,000 base salary, a $165,000 increase from his senior engineer position. The conference room erupted in applause. I clapped along with everyone else, keeping the same neutral expression I'd perfected over 16 years of watching less qualified people climb past me. What they didn't announce was my compensation adjustment. That came later, delivered privately by Diana Foster, our VP of Human Resources, in a hastily scheduled 3:20 p.m. meeting that lasted exactly 9 minutes. "Oscar, we want you to know how much Midtech Solutions values your contributions," Diana said, sliding a single-page document across her desk. "Your mentorship of Bryce has been invaluable to his development and our organization's success. We're pleased to offer you a retention bonus of $18,000, payable over the next 6 months." I read the document twice. $18,000 spread over 6 months. About $3,000 per month before taxes for 16 years of building the cybersecurity infrastructure that kept this company running. For training the person who just received a $165,000 raise. "This is a one-time recognition payment," I said, keeping my voice level. "Not a salary adjustment." "That's correct. We feel this appropriately recognizes your mentorship contributions while maintaining our compensation structure integrity." I signed the acknowledgement form. Diana seemed pleased that I hadn't argued. She had no way of knowing that I'd stopped arguing with Midtech Solutions about 6 months ago when I realized that technical expertise and institutional loyalty were liabilities in their promotion calculus, not assets. My name is Oscar Reynolds. I'm 48 years old, spent 6 years in the Navy working on network security systems, and I just watched the junior engineer I trained from day one leapfrog me into the CTO position while I received what amounts to a monthly tip for 16 years of work. Before I explain what happened next, let me tell you exactly what those 16 years looked like and why this moment was 16 years in the making. I joined Midtech Solutions in March 2008 as a senior systems engineer, specializing in enterprise cybersecurity and network architecture. The company was mid-sized then, about 220 employees, focused on providing IT solutions to regional businesses and government contractors. My Navy background gave me security clearance that opened doors to federal contracts most civilian tech companies couldn't touch. My role involved designing security frameworks that protected client data and prevented the kind of cyber attacks that were becoming more sophisticated every year. The government work paid well. Agencies needed people who understood both the technical requirements and the compliance standards that came with handling classified information. Bryce Martinez joined in July 2008 as a summer intern. Fresh from college with a computer science degree and zero real-world experience in cybersecurity, he was 23 years old, enthusiastic, and completely overwhelmed by the technical requirements of enterprise security. His first day, he asked me what a firewall actually did beyond blocking bad stuff. His first assignment was helping me with a network security audit for a $450,000 Department of Defense contract. I spent 8 weeks teaching him the fundamentals, how firewalls actually work, how to identify vulnerabilities in legacy systems, how to build incident response protocols that would hold up under federal auditing. He struggled initially, confusing basic networking concepts and making configuration errors that could have compromised client security if anyone else had been reviewing his work. I covered for him, corrected his mistakes before they reached production systems, walked him through every security protocol until he understood not just what to do, but why we did it that way. Spent evenings after regular work hours explaining cybersecurity concepts that should have been prerequisites for the position. You have to understand, this wasn't just casual mentoring. I had 2 kids, Sarah was 14, Michael was 11, and my wife Carol was working part-time as a school administrator while taking night classes for her master's degree. My evenings were supposed to be for family dinner, homework help, soccer practice. Instead, I was at the office until 8 p.m. most nights, teaching Bryce how to read network logs and configure intrusion detection systems. Carol never complained, but I could see the strain. "Why don't they hire someone who already knows this stuff?" she'd ask when I'd come home late again. Good question. Because it was cheaper to hire a kid at $45,000 and let me train him than to hire an experienced security engineer at $85,000. By month 6, Bryce was functional. By year 2, he was competent. By year 4, He was genuinely good at the technical work. I had essentially provided him with a graduate-level education in enterprise cybersecurity while maintaining my own client responsibilities, project deadlines, and trying to be present for my kids' high school years. During those 16 years, I trained Bryce on 89 distinct client engagements. I taught him how to build security architectures that MidTech eventually sold as proprietary solutions to clients. I brought him into strategy meetings with government procurement officers and coached him on how to explain technical security requirements to non-technical decision-makers. I introduced him to industry contacts who became his professional network. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was teaching Bryce everything about cybersecurity, Sarah and Michael were growing up. Sarah graduated high school in 2012. I missed her senior award ceremony because I was in Washington, D.C. with Bryce, presenting a security framework to the Department of Homeland Security. Michael made varsity baseball his junior year. I missed half his games because of emergency client calls that Bryce couldn't handle alone. When MidTech won the contract with First Regional Bank in 2012, a $3.2 million engagement that became our largest client relationship, I'd designed the core security infrastructure that secured the deal. Bryce had assisted, but the foundational architecture was mine. The bank's executives were impressed by our presentation, specifically by how Bryce could explain complex security concepts in business terms they understood. I'd taught him how to do that. By 2018, when that first regional contract renewed at $4.1 million annually, Bryce was presenting system updates to the bank's board using frameworks I'd taught him to build. My name never appeared in those board presentations. It showed up in project documentation, buried in technical appendices as senior systems engineer, infrastructure development. Bryce's name was on the presentation slides as lead security architect. Strategic implementation. The pattern was consistent across every major client. I built the intellectual property. Bryce delivered it to clients with the confidence and polish I'd coached him to develop. Executives saw Bryce in client meetings, noticed his presentation skills, assumed he was the primary architect of our security solutions. This wasn't happening by accident. Perry Coleman, our CEO, had made it clear during company meetings that MidTech was evolving from a technical services provider to a strategic consulting firm. We need people who can speak the language of business leadership, he'd say. Technical expertise is table stakes. What differentiates us is our ability to translate complex solutions into business value. Translation. Being good at cybersecurity wasn't enough anymore. You had to be good at selling cybersecurity to people who didn't understand it. Bryce was naturally good at that. He had an easy way with executives, could explain technical concepts without making people feel stupid, and had the kind of polished presentation style that impressed boardrooms. I, on the other hand, had spent my career getting really good at the technical work itself. By 2020, MidTech had grown to 380 employees. Bryce had been promoted to senior systems architect, essentially lateral to my position despite having 8 years less experience. His salary had increased to $118,000. Mine was $124,000, a $6,000 difference for someone with nearly a decade more expertise and responsibility for every major client security implementation. More importantly, I was starting to see the financial pressure that comes with having teenagers. Sarah had started her sophomore year at Virginia Tech, $28,000 per year for tuition, room, and board. Michael was a junior in high school, already talking about engineering programs that would cost just as much. Carol had finished her master's degree and was working full-time as an assistant principal. But even with both our salaries, we were looking at $56,000 per year in college costs for the next 6 years. My father had also started showing signs of dementia. Nothing dramatic yet, but forgetting appointments, getting confused about dates, asking the same questions multiple times during phone calls. Mom was handling it, but we all knew where this was heading. Assisted living facilities in our area ran $4,000 to $6,000 per month. My brother lived in California and couldn't help much financially, so that responsibility would likely fall to us. I raised the salary disparity during my 2020 performance review. Diana's response was diplomatic but clear. Oscar, you're incredibly valuable as a technical specialist, but Bryce has demonstrated client-facing skills and strategic vision that align with our growth trajectory. We need different types of talent for different roles, different types of talent for different compensation levels, I said. The market determines compensation, Oscar. Bryce's skill set is in high demand right now, the skill set I taught him, which speaks to your value as a mentor and technical leader. That's why we're discussing a possible promotion to principal engineer next year, with expanded responsibilities for developing our junior talent. Principal engineer. A fancy title that meant I'd be training more people like Bryce while they got promoted past me. I thanked Diana for her time and left the meeting. I stopped pushing for promotions after that conversation. Instead, I focused on documenting everything. Every system I'd designed, every security protocol I'd developed, every client relationship I'd maintained, every hour I'd spent training Bryce and the 6 other junior engineers who'd rotated through our division over the years. Because I understood something that Diana and Midtech's executive team apparently didn't. Institutional knowledge is only valuable when the institution can retain it. The documentation wasn't out of spite, it was professional habit from my Navy days. You always document procedures so the next person can maintain what you've built. But as I was writing up 16 years' worth of security architectures and client relationships, I realized how much of Midtech's core competency lived in my head. I knew why we'd designed First Regional's network topology with triple redundancy instead of standard failover. I understood the historical context behind every security decision we'd made for our government clients. I could explain the technical reasoning that justified our premium pricing to procurement officers who were looking for ways to cut IT budgets. Bryce knew how to present these solutions, but I'd built them. The emergency started on a Friday morning at 2:33 a.m. First Regional Bank's Security Operations Center had detected sophisticated intrusion attempts targeting their core banking systems. The attack was ongoing, coordinated, and unlike anything their internal team had seen before. They needed immediate technical support from Midtech's security team. My phone rang at 2:35 a.m. Bryce, voice tight with panic. "Oscar, I need you on this call. The FBI cybersecurity unit is asking technical questions about our network segmentation protocols, and I can't explain the underlying architecture. They're talking about potentially shutting down the entire banking system until we can confirm containment." I was already awake. Old Navy habits die hard. I'd been reviewing security logs on my home monitoring system when my phone rang. At 48, I still kept the sleep schedule I'd learned on watch duty. Light sleep, quick to wake, immediately alert. What specifically are they asking about? The isolation protocols for the transaction processing servers. They want to know why we designed the network topology with triple redundancy instead of standard failover. And they're questioning whether our containment procedures can actually prevent lateral movement if the attackers have already compromised the authentication layer. I knew exactly how to explain it because I designed that architecture in 2014. The triple redundancy wasn't just about preventing system failures. It was about creating isolated segments that could be quickly contained if one section was compromised. I'd spent 2 weeks teaching Bryce the reasoning behind every security decision, walking him through attack scenarios and explaining why our approach was superior to industry standards. He'd apparently forgotten the technical details that justified a $4.1 million annual contract. "I'll be on the call," I said. "Send me the conference details." At 2:41 a.m., I joined the emergency conference call. 12 people from First Regional's security team, 3 FBI cybersecurity specialists, the bank's CTO, Bryce looking exhausted and overwhelmed, and Curtis Walsh, the bank's chief risk officer, looking very angry. "Oscar, thank God," Bryce said when my video connected. "Curtis and the FBI team have technical questions about our containment architecture." Curtis didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Reynolds, we've got active intrusion attempts on our transaction systems. Before we implement your containment protocols and potentially shut down banking operations for 200,000 customers, I need to understand why your security architecture requires us to isolate systems that handle $50 million in daily transactions." I opened my laptop, pulled up the network documentation I'd written 10 years ago, and began walking Curtis and the FBI team through the technical reasoning behind every architectural decision. For 35 minutes, I explained network segmentation theory, containment protocols, and threat vector analysis to a room full of people whose understanding of cybersecurity was theoretical at best. The FBI lead, Agent Thompson, kept interrupting with questions about our isolation procedures. "If we implement your containment protocol, how do we know the attackers haven't already established persistence in the supposedly clean segments?" "Because of the air-gapped verification system," I explained for the second time. Each network segment has independent monitoring that operates on separate hardware. The attackers would need physical access to compromise the verification layer, and our security footage confirms no unauthorized physical access to the data centers. Bryce was silent throughout this explanation. He should have been able to answer these questions. He'd been presenting himself as the architect of these systems for 6 years. Halfway through the explanation, while describing how our isolation protocols could contain the breach without shutting down critical banking functions, I realized something. I was doing exactly what I'd done for 16 years, solving problems that Bryce couldn't solve, maintaining client relationships that Bryce couldn't maintain, providing expertise that Midtech valued at $18,000 while paying Bryce $240,000 to take credit for it. Agent Thompson asked another question about network topology. Mr. Reynolds, can you walk us through the specific redundancy protocols that allow transaction processing to continue during containment? I looked at Bryce on the video call. He was staring at his laptop screen, clearly unable to contribute anything meaningful to a discussion about systems he'd been presenting as his own work. At 3:17 a.m., while explaining network topology for the second time to an FBI agent who still didn't understand why we'd designed redundant isolation layers, I made a decision. I stopped talking mid-sentence, closed my laptop, looked directly into the camera. Curtis, I apologize, but I need to step away from this call. Bryce can address your remaining questions about the security architecture he's been presenting to your board for the past 6 years. The conference went silent. Bryce's face went white. Oscar, wait. I disconnected from the call, shut down my laptop, walked to the kitchen where my wife Carol was making coffee, having been woken up by my 2:30 a.m. phone call. You're done early, she said, confused. I thought this was a major security breach. It is. I left. You left in the middle of an FBI cybersecurity call? In the middle of explaining something that Bryce should be able to explain himself if he's worth $240,000 as Chief Technology Officer. Carol sat down at the kitchen table, watching me carefully. What are you doing, Oscar? Something I should have done 6 months ago when I realized this company values presentation skills over actual competence. I'm not covering for Bryce anymore. If he can't handle technical questions about systems he claims to have architected, that's Midtech's problem, not mine. You could get fired for this, maybe. But I've been thinking about what you said last month when Sarah called about her senior year tuition costs. We're looking at $112,000 over the next 4 years for both kids, plus whatever dad's care costs when mom can't handle it anymore. My current trajectory at Midtech gets me a principal engineer title and maybe $140,000 by the time I'm 55. That's not enough. Carol poured herself coffee, then looked at me. So what's the plan? I don't know yet, but I'm done subsidizing other people's careers at the expense of my family's financial security. At 3:45 a.m., my phone started ringing. Bryce. I declined the call. At 3:52 a.m., text message, Oscar, please call back. The FBI is asking about containment procedures I don't understand, and Curtis is threatening to terminate our contract. I didn't respond. At 4:07 a.m., another call. Diana Foster. I declined. By 4:30 a.m., I'd received 19 calls and 31 text messages from various people at Midtech. I turned my phone to airplane mode and went for a run. Running at 4:30 in the morning isn't unusual for me. Old Navy habit, PT at 0500, shower, breakfast, ready for the day by 0630. Carol used to joke that I was the only civilian she knew who got up earlier than her father, who'd been a Marine drill instructor. As I ran my usual 5-mile route through our neighborhood, I thought about the conversation I'd just walked away from. Without me on that call, Bryce had no technical expertise to offer First Regional or the FBI. He could present security solutions I'd built, but he couldn't troubleshoot them under pressure. Let me explain what was happening at Midtech while I was running. Bryce couldn't answer the FBI's technical questions. He tried to schedule a follow-up call, promised detailed written responses. Curtis Walsh wasn't accepting delays. They had an active security breach affecting 200,000 bank customers and needed immediate answers about containment procedures. Without me on the call, Bryce had no answers. He tried to explain the network segmentation protocols and got the technical reasoning wrong. He attempted to describe the containment procedures and contradicted the documentation I'd written. Agent Thompson asked about the air-gapped verification systems. Bryce didn't know what that meant. Curtis asked about the redundancy protocols. Bryce couldn't explain why we'd designed them differently from industry standards. By 4:15 a.m., Curtis had ended the call and emailed Midtech's CEO, Perry Coleman, formally notifying him that First Regional was suspending the security contract pending a comprehensive review of Midtech's technical capabilities. Suspending a $4.1 million annual contract gets CEO attention very quickly. By 5:30 a.m., Perry had called an emergency executive meeting with Diana Foster and Dale Murphy, our COO. By 6:15 a.m., they'd determined they needed me on a call with First Regional and the FBI to salvage the relationship. By 6:23 a.m., Diana was calling me again. I was back from my run by then, drinking coffee in my kitchen, phone still in airplane mode. Carol was getting ready for work, watching me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You're really doing this. I'm really doing this." They can't have it both ways. Either I'm valuable enough to compensate appropriately and promote based on my actual contributions, or I'm just a technical specialist they can reward with an $18,000 tip while promoting the person I trained into a CTO position. They chose the latter. Now they get to see what that choice costs. At 7 a.m., I turned my phone back on. 53 missed calls, 67 text messages, 14 voicemails. I listened to the most recent voicemail from Perry Coleman himself. "Oscar, this is Perry. I understand you had to step away from the security call this morning. I need you to call me immediately. We have a situation that requires your expertise, and I want to discuss how we can resolve this together. Please call me as soon as you get this message." I deleted the voicemail. Didn't call back. At 8:15 a.m., someone knocked on my front door. Diana Foster, standing on my porch in business attire, looking stressed. I opened the door but didn't invite her inside. "Diana, Oscar, we need to talk. Can I come in? I'd prefer to keep this conversation brief. What do you need?" "Perry needs you to join a call with Curtis Walsh and the FBI team at 11 a.m. today. First Regional is threatening to terminate the contract unless we can provide satisfactory technical support. That's unfortunate. Bryce is the Chief Technology Officer. Surely he should be capable of providing technical support for systems he's been presenting to First Regional for 6 years. Oscar, we both know you designed those systems. You have the technical expertise we need on this call. Then perhaps Midtech should have considered that before promoting Bryce to CTO and offering me an $18,000 retention bonus." Diana's expression hardened. "This isn't about your compensation. This is about a $4.1 million client relationship." "No, Diana. This is exactly about my compensation. It's about Midtech deciding that 16 years of building the cybersecurity infrastructure that generates $4.1 million in annual revenue is worth $18,000, while the person who learned everything from me gets $240,000 to present my work. You made that decision. Now you get to live with the consequences. Are you refusing to participate in client calls? I'm simply unavailable for the 11 a.m. call. I have personal matters to attend to. If Midtech needs technical expertise to maintain the First Regional relationship, I suggest consulting your Chief Technology Officer. That's why you're paying him $240,000, isn't it?" I closed the door before she could respond. The 11 a.m. call happened without me. I know because Perry sent me an email at 11:47 a.m. describing it as a difficult conversation that would have benefited from your technical input. Translation: it was a disaster. First Regional terminated their contract at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. $4.1 million in annual revenue gone. By Monday morning, I had contacted 8 former colleagues who'd left Midtech for cybersecurity firms over the past 5 years. I asked each of them the same question. Would their current employer be interested in someone with my background and expertise? 7 of them said yes immediately. The 8th said his firm wasn't currently hiring senior engineers, but would create a position if I was interested. By Wednesday, I had 3 formal interview requests and 2 preliminary compensation discussions starting above $150,000 base salary with performance bonuses that could add another $40,000 annually. Here's what I learned during those interviews. The cybersecurity industry was desperate for people with my combination of government security clearance, technical depth, and 16 years of hands-on experience with enterprise systems. Every conversation started the same way. We heard what happened at Midtech. We need someone who can actually build secure systems, not just talk about them. I accepted an offer from Hexagon Security Partners the following Friday, $165,000 base salary, performance bonus structure capped at 35% of base, full benefits, and a $22,000 signing bonus. More importantly, their CEO, Joy Parker, had personally told me during my interview, "We're hiring you because we need someone who can build institutional knowledge, not just present it. If you can do what you did at MidTech for us, you'll be running this division within 3 years." My last day at MidTech was the following Monday. Perry Coleman asked to speak with me privately before I left. "Oscar, I want you to know that we recognize we made some mistakes in how we handled your career development. If you're willing to reconsider, we're prepared to offer you a significantly improved compensation package." What kind of package? Vice President of Technical Operations, $185,000 base, plus equity participation. You'd oversee all technical implementations and have direct report relationships with our senior engineers. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. $185,000 to clean up the problems created by promoting someone to CTO who can't do the job. Bryce has strong leadership qualities. He'd benefit from having someone with your technical expertise in a supporting role. Supporting role, after 16 years of building everything he presents as his own work. Perry shifted uncomfortably. "We value both technical excellence and strategic leadership, Oscar. Different people bring different strengths. You're right. And I'm taking my strengths somewhere that values them appropriately." I walked out of MidTech that afternoon and never looked back. Within 6 months, the consequences of my departure became clear. First Regional had moved their security contract to Hexagon Security Partners. I didn't pitch them. Curtis Walsh called me directly at my new firm and asked if we could provide the same level of technical expertise I'd previously delivered at MidTech. We could, and did, for $4.8 million annually. $700,000 more than MidTech had been charging them. Over the next 18 months, 4 other major MidTech clients followed the same pattern. Technical questions that Bryce couldn't answer, security incidents he couldn't diagnose, compliance audits he couldn't pass without the institutional knowledge I'd taken with me. MidTech's cybersecurity revenue dropped by $8.7 million in the first year after I left. They hired 4 new senior engineers to try to rebuild their technical capabilities, but you can't recreate 16 years of institutional knowledge overnight. Meanwhile, at Hexagon, I was thriving. Within 12 months, I'd been promoted to Senior Director of Cybersecurity Solutions with a salary of $195,000. 18 months after that, I became Vice President of Technical Operations at $225,000 plus equity that was actually worth something. I also started a consulting practice on weekends, helping companies properly value and retain senior technical talent. The irony wasn't lost on me. Companies were paying me $50,000 to $75,000 per engagement to tell them why MidTech's approach to talent management destroys organizational value. Bryce lasted 14 months as CTO after I left. Without my technical support, his limitations became obvious to everyone. He was quietly demoted back to Senior Systems Engineer at $125,000, a $115,000 pay cut. He resigned 4 months later. Last I heard, he was working for a regional consulting firm doing basic network administration for $98,000. I don't take pleasure in Bryce's career difficulties. He was competent when he had proper guidance and support. His mistake wasn't accepting the promotion. It was allowing MidTech to promote him into a position that required expertise he didn't independently possess while simultaneously undervaluing the person who'd provided that expertise. But MidTech's mistake was more fundamental. They confused presentation skills with technical capabilities. They promoted charisma over competence. They valued the person who could sell the work more than the person who could build it. That mistake cost them $8.7 million in revenue, their largest client, significant market reputation, and the institutional knowledge that had taken 16 years to develop, all to save money on my compensation while rewarding someone who couldn't function without me. Today, my daughter Sarah is a senior at Virginia Tech, debt-free. My son Michael is starting his sophomore year at Georgia Tech, also debt-free. My father is in a good assisted living facility that we can afford without financial stress. Carol and I are on track for a comfortable retirement. Most importantly, I work for a company that understands the difference between building intellectual property and presenting it. At Hexagon, the people who create value get compensated for creating value. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making people regret what they did to you. It's making them regret what they lost when you stopped letting them do it. The audience has left, and the person who wrote the script is somewhere else, building something better, getting paid what they're actually worth. The most dangerous employee to undervalue isn't the one who complains loudly about compensation or threatens to quit. It's the one who quietly builds all your institutional knowledge, maintains your critical client relationships, and generates your competitive advantages until the day they decide they're done subsidizing your poor judgment. Because when that person leaves, they don't just take their individual contributions with them. They take the foundational expertise that everyone else's performance depends on, and you don't realize how much you needed them until you're watching $4.1 million walk out the door during a 3:17 a.m. phone call.